Connor Bedard fever has gripped Chicago and the NHL. Jack Bushman is here to talk about Bedard, the Blackhawks, and what you need to know heading into the new season. Next on the Locked On NHL 2023-2024 season preview. Gil Martin here. The NHL season now less than a week away, and Locked On season preview coverage continues as we welcome in Jack Bushman, the host of Locked On Blackhawks, to detail everything you need to know about the Chicago Blackhawks ahead of the 2023-2024 season. Jack, I know this is an obvious answer, but what's the biggest storyline surrounding your team heading into this season?
Well, funny enough, Gildy, I'm going to give you a two-parter because the first one is so obvious. All eyes are going to be on Connor Bedard to see how he's going to fare against, grown men in the NHL speed. There's obviously been a ton of buzz and a ton of hype behind this kid, not only since he's been drafted, but for the last, year and a half now that he's really been on everyone's radar. And everyone's going to be looking at, he's been thrown in that generational talent type of bucket. And there's expectations obviously that come with that. And Blackhawks fans are going to be hoping to see him, take that next step, show signs of progression, show signs of development and comfortability, and just getting the understanding of what it takes to play this game at the highest level. We actually got a little bit of a first glimpse at Bedard last night in the Blackhawks preseason opener, and boy, he did not disappoint and did a lot of good things and made a lot of good moves against quality NHLers that the Blues had in the lineup. So obviously, us Blackhawks fans and everyone around the NHL is going to be tuning into the Blackhawks more than they have for sure the last couple of years to go and watch Connor Bedard. But I think the biggest thing actually for the Blackhawks as a whole, Gil, is development, not only with Connor Bedard, but there's a lot of young guys who are going to get their first crack at being full-time NHLers. Someone like Lucas Reichel, who right now is penciled in to be their second line center. The whole left side of their defense looks like it could be very young as well. Wyatt Kaiser's there right now. Alex Vlasic has gotten some time in the last couple of seasons, but this is his really first full NHL shot. And then Kevin Korchinski, who was the 7th overall pick in the 2022 NHL draft. A big storyline in Blackhawks training camp is whether or not he's going to make the NHL roster. And if he does, that's going to make for a very young left side of the Blackhawks blue line. And there are a lot of young players on this team. So obviously it's very key for Connor Bedard to show signs of development as well. But I think the biggest storyline for the Blackhawks as a whole is development from their young players in general, not just Bedard.
All those high draft picks now starting to blossom and mature. What was your team's most significant offseason move and why?
Yeah, I think it has to be Taylor Hall, just because when you look at what the Blackhawks had coming back to their roster leading up to free agency this summer, there just wasn't anyone that really could play with Connor Bedard. And it felt like it would have been a disservice to his development, as I just outlined how key that is. I think it would have been a disservice to Connor Bedard to go and throw him out there with, Andreas Athanasiou and Taylor Radish. You need someone who is a true skill guy to go and play with him, someone that can keep up with his style of play. And Taylor Hall is just that. And I also think it was a smart addition to this roster by Kyle Davidson. One thing I've really noticed about him since taking over as general manager is he's gone after guys who are going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, who are going to get a really good opportunity here in Chicago that they may not get with other more successful NHL teams at this point in time. But Taylor Hall is someone who's still trying to prove to himself and to the rest of the league that he can be a top 6 forward in this league. You got to remember in 2017-18, this guy won the MVP, but he's been all over the place, bounced around between Arizona, Buffalo, Boston these last few years. He's going to get a legitimate top 6 shot alongside Connor Bedard. And I mean, what a special opportunity for Taylor Hall, right? Handed the first line keys to go and play with a generational talent. So I think it was really big for Kyle Davidson to bring someone in that can actually play the same type of game that Connor Bedard wants to play. And even though training camp's only been open for, a week and a half, 2 weeks, I've liked what those two have done together thus far. So I think Taylor Hall undoubtedly was the biggest add for the Blackhawks this offseason.
So who figures to be the most important player on the Blackhawks, and what makes them so crucial to the team's success?
Yeah, I do think Connor Bedard is going to be the driving factor on the top line, but I actually think Lucas Reichel at the second line center spot is really what's going to make or break this Blackhawks team. And look, Gil, the expectations around the Hawks in terms of the standings aren't too high, but I think they could be a bit of a surprise if Lucas Reichel is able to take that next step. And last season, he had a couple of different NHL stints, and the first couple really didn't go all that well. But something just seemed to click for him at the end of the season. He was nearly a point per game guy those last 15, 16 games. And I'll tell you what, throughout training camp, in the Blackhawks scrimmages that they run, and even in last night's preseason game, Lucas Reichel looks like he does have the ability to be the best player on the Blackhawks this season. I think Connor Bedard undoubtedly has the higher upside, but Lucas Reichel already has a little bit of familiarity with the game, and he looks like he's ready to take that next step. I've been really impressed with what he's done so far, and if he can create a second line scoring threat that other teams have to respect behind Connor Bedard, that's what's going to take this Blackhawks offense to the next level. So I think Lucas Reichel is really going to be a key factor for this Blackhawks team.
Lots of possible answers to this one with so many young, talented players coming up, but who's a potential breakout candidate this year?
Yeah, I actually think it's probably someone that a lot of folks around the NHL who aren't familiar with these Blackhawks youngsters don't really have that much familiarity with, but it's defenseman Wyatt Kaiser, who came in after his junior year with University of Minnesota Duluth last year and played in 9 NHL games. I thought he looked all right, and quite honestly, my expectation was, okay, he's going to go down to Rockford for a year. And we've kind of seen this path since Davidson's come in. There's no rush whatsoever. So I just assumed he was going to go down to Rockford, kind of get that year of pro experience under his belt. And then when the time was right, the Blackhawks would call him up. But Gil, he has been the biggest standout for the Blackhawks during training camp so far. And he's gotten earned the job to look, as of right now, begin the season alongside Seth Jones on that top defensive pairing. And in that preseason game last night against the Blues, again, I don't want to overblow one preseason game, but he outplayed Seth Jones, and he was the Blackhawks' best defenseman on the ice. And the poise that he showed and how he didn't, waver under duress. And when he's facing opposing forecheckers right in his face, he doesn't panic. He makes the calm and easy play. I thought he just made all the right reads all night long. And for a kid doing that with only 9 NHL games of experience, it was really impressive to me. And undoubtedly, he's earned that spot to open up the season alongside Seth Jones. So Wyatt Kaiser, I think, is someone to keep an eye out for.
So when you put it all together, what would a successful season look like for the Blackhawks this year, and what's at stake if that's not achieved?
Yeah, I think this is a really tough question to answer for the Chicago Blackhawks, because the way that I've kind of explained this season to a lot of other people, it feels like it's such a runway year, and it's just going to be a year where us as fans, along with the Blackhawks front office, are just gonna kind of learn what they have. Okay, where's Bedard at? Where's Lucas Reichel at? How are our young defensemen looking? It's going to be a year where the Blackhawks can look themselves in the mirror and kind of understand where they go from here. And there just isn't the expectation around this team to win. So as far as a successful season would go, Gil, I think it's just all about development. If we're seeing these young kids that I've talked about all throughout this preview, Connor Bedard, Lucas Reichel, Wyatt Kaiser, Alex Vlasic, Kevin Korchinski, if he's there, if those guys show signs that they're, clearly the part of the new era of the Chicago Blackhawks, I think that would make for a successful season, along with all of them staying healthy. I don't really want to put any expectations on the Blackhawks, because we quite honestly, no one really knows what they're going to be. The assumption is probably not much better than last year, but this is a wacky sport, Gil. You never truly know. And unless guys get hurt, I just don't really know how this could be a down year for the Chicago Blackhawks, because worst case scenario, yeah, they're not very good, and they have another top 5, top 10 pick, along with the Tampa Bay Lightning's first round pick in next year's draft. So they still have a slew of draft picks loaded up for the future, along with a top 2 prospect pool in the entire NHL. I think it's just kind of a free run at things this year, a very free runway type of season for the Chicago Blackhawks. And quite honestly, I think the fans are going to enjoy that, and there's going to be a lot of excitement around this team.
Sounds that way. Should be an interesting ride, Jack. Thank you so much. For more on the Blackhawks, be sure to follow Locked On Blackhawks on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. And check out the season previews for all 32 teams across the Locked On NHL channel, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.